Crete is one of the most beloved tourist destinations in Europe. It has beautiful nature, historical sites, fantastic beaches, delicious food, and it's inexpensive. What's not to love here? The crowds it gets in the summer, I guess. But I won't know about that, since I prefer traveling in the shoulder seasons anyway. In this video, I will share my experience of a week-long road trip in Crete and provide you with tips and inspirations for your next trip. I enjoy traveling with a clear plan of what to do and when, so I did my research before this trip. Firstly, one should decide how to get there and where. Crete is a popular destination for organized trips offered by local travel agencies. Alternatively, you can come on your own by plane or boat to one of the main cities, Heraklion or Chania. After a long debate with my family, we chose to travel on our own instead of with a local agency. It was cheaper, easier, and more interesting to travel around this way. The agencies, or at least those from Lithuania, take the travelers to kitschy touristic hotspots which look the same all across southern Europe. Meanwhile, the best beaches, natural sites, and historical sites are much further away from those locations. So either way, everyone who wants to see the best of Crete needs to rent a car, which is quite easy and cheaper than in many other countries in Europe. So we traveled from Vilnius to Heraklion, which was the only airport offering a direct flight. But we still wanted to visit the western side of the island, even though it is closer to Chania airport, but we had no access to it. Anyway, we decided to drive from Heraklion to Rethymno and Chania regions ourselves and dedicate our 7-day trip exploring this side of the island by car, staying in various hotels along the way. If you have a week for the trip, my tip is not to cover more than half of the island. Crete is large and the roads are winding, so no fast travels, and you'll want to stop everywhere. It's so picturesque, just wonderful views everywhere. Plus, there will be a reason to come back again to explore the other side as well. We arrived in Crete in mid-October. Coming from Lithuania, where we are accustomed to much colder climates, this was an ideal time for us to travel. There were no crowds, the sea was pleasantly warm, and the weather was not too hot. But sometimes at this time of year, this can be a little unpredictable, and we had a few windy days. And lastly, before getting into the details, I want to mention that since this was a multi-generational family trip, our focus was on resting, enjoying good food, and mildly exploring the nature. We didn't go on long hiking treks or visit many historical sites this time. Fortunately, our plane landed early in the day at Heraklion airport. We quickly picked up our rental car and hit the road immediately towards Rethymno, which is a smaller historical city situated midway between Heraklion and Chania. The road is beautifully situated between the mountains and the sea. On the way, we had our first Greek lunch at one of the random tavernas on the seashore. This was our first experience with the Greek-sized portions. We ordered a meal for each person, but that was a big mistake. One Greek salad could feed the 4 of us. On the way to Rethymno, there are plenty of sightseeing options. We decided to visit the historic Arcadi monastery. Today it is open as a museum, displaying its beautiful architecture and courtyards surrounding an even more impressive 16th century church. This was a lovely and peaceful place to visit at the start of our trip. After that, it took just half an hour to reach Rethymno, where we checked into one of the hotels along the coast, had some rest and visited the beach. However, we were quite disappointed with the beach quality there. I guess the number of hotels surrounding it negatively affects it. On the flip side, later in the trip, all the other beaches were fantastic. In the evening, it was time to explore the town. Rethymno has a compact but charming old town with narrow streets and restaurants at every turn. Most of it was built during Venetian times. There is a fort and a harbor with a cute small lighthouse. The second day was dedicated to nature. One of the easiest nature hikes to access from Rethymno is Mili Gorge, just a 10-minute car ride away from Rethymno. There are also local buses to get you there. Mili Gorge is quite different from the other hiking trails in Crete because of its greenery. It is lush, picturesque, and there are some interesting ruins along the way. A big plus for this hike is that it's family-friendly, 4 or 5 kilometers one way. We walk downhill from the southern entrance. Those who seek a challenge can definitely go both ways from any of the entrances. There was a small cafeteria in the middle of the gorge where we received our produce via rope connected to the road. Also, along the way there were plenty of ruins to explore and a small chapel. At the end of the route, there was another cafeteria where we decided to have lunch and were pleasantly surprised. We didn't expect much from a rustic cafeteria in the middle of nowhere, but we had fried zucchini flowers, fresh juices, and grilled food. There was even a small farm with chickens and lemon trees. We knew from before that there is a local taxi service available at the canteen to order for a ride back to the starting point of the trail, so we called for one. It was quite pricey at 20 euros for a short ride uphill, but considering that there were 4 of us, it was fine. The taxi saved us a lot of time as we had to go to Chania. We were amazed to find a wonderful beach along the way, so we stopped for a quick dip in the sea and relaxed from the hike. It was Episcopi Beach near Pyrgos town. We had the whole beach to ourselves. When booking accommodation in Chania, we followed the advice of my sister, who had traveled there before. Instead of booking a place in town, we opted for a location in the peninsula. And sure enough, she was right. Not only are the hotels very cheaper, but the views, the space and nature were just amazing. We stayed at this place for 2 nights, but it was one of those places that we didn't want to leave. On the 3rd day, we visited the natural sites in the peninsula. We also tried visiting a famously beautiful beach, Seitan Limani. However, after evaluating our capabilities with a 6-year-old for the climb, we decided to go to another natural beach with easier access and soft sand. The peninsula has other beautiful tiny sand beaches surrounded by rocks on the sides. After sunset, we went to Chania itself to explore the old town. The old architecture looks quite mysterious at night, but of course, in the center it was quite busy. There are some streets just for souvenir shopping, as it is a very touristy city, but some of the shops were very interesting and unique. Anyway, as it was Saturday night, the old town center around the harbor and the main streets were bustling with both tourists and locals. It appeared that everyone was in the streets, yet it wasn't overly crowded. We got lucky to come across a traditional Sirtaki performance show with a local audience hiding behind the touristic harbor area. It's beautiful that the local culture is still strong here. The next day was probably our busiest. The plan was to start the day by going for brunch at an organic olive oil farm located 40 minutes drive southwest from Chania. On the way, we visited the Vuves olive tree, one of the world's oldest olive trees still producing fruit. It is estimated to be at least 2,000 years old. Fun fact, branches from this tree were used to weave victor's wreath for the winners of the 2004 Athens Olympics and the 2008 of Beijing Olympics. Then we reached the Biolea Astrikas estate, an organic olive farm. I found this place through my online research and was not disappointed. The farm is beautifully situated on the hill with stunning views all around. Anyone can have a free tour of the olive oil production mill with olive oil tasting at the end, but one needs to book it in advance through their website. This place also has a restaurant, and we picked a degustation meal there because we wanted to spend more time in this idyllic countryside farm. The food was wonderful, made from local produce and reasonably priced. I would love to come back there again. But of course, as we were such a restless group of travelers, we had to continue our journey. We debated whether to visit the botanical garden near Chania or one of the most famous places on the island, Elafonissi beach. Ultimately, we chose to go to Elafonissi beach, which turned out to be a mistake. Even though it doesn't look like much on the map, it is still quite a long way to drive there through the small mountain roads. The problem for us was that after the beach we had to head all the way back to the south of the island, Frangokastelo village, but later about that. The thing is that the famous beach itself wasn't that spectacular for us. As we arrived, we were quite disappointed with the facilities, the crowd, and the supposedly beautiful view of the beach that was not visible from ground level anyway. Well, the sand did have some of its famous pink color, so it was nice to take a walk and take pictures. But the sea there is good only for children to bathe in, as the water is very shallow. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we had a more enjoyable beach experience at the tiny unknown sand beaches near Chania than here. Maybe if you have all day for hiking around the area and finding a more secluded part of the beach, Elafonissi could be a lovely place to visit. But if you have limited time like we did, driving all this way isn't really worth it, especially with what awaited us at the next place. So after we had our dip in the sea, we prepared for a long road trip to the southern Crete. Well, technically Elafonissi is also in the south, but there are no roads here to go towards the east, so we had to drive back to Chania to head south to the village called Frangokastelo. This took us 3 hours. So, why go to Frangokastelo? Early morning on day 5, we wake up in one of the village's apartment hotels, surrounded by fields of olive trees, with mountains on one side and the sea on the other. The only thing you could hear was birds chirping and the waves of the sea. The village's tranquility and the beautiful seaside cliffs are what attracted us to this place. We spent the whole day at the beach next to the Orthi Ammos cliffs. There were very few people in the middle of October here, and those who were there seemed quite relaxed. There also were many naturalists. We used bikes to get around and visited a local mini market near the castle, which surprisingly had locally made ice cream and local olive oil for sale. I should have shopped more there. Unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures. One more thing worth mentioning is that there are a few tavernas at the cliffs offering traditional Greek food and fresh fish. At sunset, we took a walk along the cliffs to see the 14th century Venetian castle, but it was still undergoing renovations. It is not much to do here, but it is so peaceful. This was our favorite spot to relax, far from the noise of civilization. After a peaceful day at the beach, we hit the road on the morning of day 6. The goal is to reach the famous Preveli Palm Tree Forest before the tourist buses and boats arrive, as the place is very popular and for a good reason. Preveli Forest is a peculiar place, a river valley overgrown with palm trees where the river flows into the sea, so the forest reaches the beach too. In one go, the visitor can take a walk through a palm tree forest, which is a rare sight in Europe, hike the gorge, and relax at the beach. But of course, the caveat here is its popularity. You should arrive early and leave early, because by 12 p.m. the place tends to get crowded, since the beach is quite small. Also, like many good things, Preveli is quite hard to reach. There are 2 ways to get here, and both are a bit complicated. We took the main path, which involves a 20-minute descent from the mountain, which means the same way to go back up later, which can be challenging for some, especially older people. But the path quality was decent and safe. From here we were on our way to our next stay, but we made a stop on the way at a quaint mountain village called Melampes for some wine tasting and a tour of a local winery. This place is definitely off the beaten track. We chose Iliana Malihin winery for its natural wines made from native Cretan grapes. This place wasn't as big and elaborate as the olive oil farm we visited, but the experience was pleasant nonetheless. And we got what we wanted: a close look behind the scenes of winemaking and tasting the local flavors. From here, it was just a 15-minute drive to our next accommodation for the night, a mountain villa near the Agia Galini fishing village. This was a lovely, quiet place with a small private pool and views of the village and the sea. After some rest by the pool, we headed down to the village for dinner. Agia Galini is a historical fishing village, beautifully situated on the cliffside. These days it feels more like a resort. It is very touristy. But still, Agia Galini has the old harbor filled with local fishing boats, which means that the restaurants must have something fresh every day here. We had some of the best seafood here from the entire trip. The next day was our last full day in Crete. We wanted to spend more time at the beach before returning to Heraklion. We had the famous Matala beach in mind, but as we approached the super crowded touristic town of Matala, we quickly changed our plans and went to a less popular beach on the opposite side of the same cliff. Kommos beach was not touristy, it was spacious, and there was even an ancient archaeological site nearby. Unfortunately, we could only see it through a fence, but the beach was fun. After saying our goodbyes to the sea, we headed back to Heraklion. Driving to Heraklion from here was quite easy. There is a proper highway, so it took only 1 hour to reach the city. We booked an apartment next to the airport because of early departure the next morning. But we still had a free evening to explore the historical city and its famous castle at the harbor. As it was no longer the weekend, the center of Heraklion seemed quieter than Chania and definitely much more modern. So this was my experience in Crete. Crete is a wonderful island, and if you take your time to rent a car, it really is freedom. You can go everywhere, and finding parking is usually not a problem. The best times I had there were far from the touristic hubs. I even decided to skip the famous ruins of Knossos, where the most famous red columns were actually built in the 19th century by archaeologists who wanted to make it more famous. If there was more time and if it was just up to me, I would have visited Phaistos Palace in the south. It is just as interesting and has beautiful views. At the same time, every road I took had dozens of other awesome places to stop by and see along the way, but there just wasn't enough time for all of them. I am definitely coming back for more Crete. Are you? Thanks for watching.